Well, May's kind of a neat month because those of you that are college, you usually get done your college year at that time. And for Becky, she's finishing up her second year of college now, which makes me feel really old. But it was kind of oddly satisfying this past semester to watch her at school because to hear about her experience in one of her classes. She took a painting class this semester. And just talking to her kind of brought me back to some of my college days when I was in college, because as a graphic design major, I took a lot of art classes and a lot of those types of things. And while they were fun, there was one aspect to all of my art classes that, even though it was helpful, it was agonizing. And it was something called your critiques. Have you ever heard of critiques? You really can't understand the anxiety and everything that goes into it unless you've actually gone through one. And basically, in a critique, you have your artwork. And a lot of times you work on artwork for a whole semester, and you do all kinds of stuff. It's painting or drawing or design or something. And, you're working late into the night, sometimes through the night to get it done and all of these things. And not only is it something you're trying to do well, but it expresses yourself. There's meaning to it. So in a sense, there's a piece of you up there on the canvas and things. And what happens is the day that it's due, you come into class and you put it up on the wall. And then you explain what it is and why you did it and some of the meaning behind it. And then for about the next 20 minutes, all the rest of your fellow students and your teacher talks about it. They critique it. They tell you, well, this isn't quite working, or I don't know how this means this. What did you mean with this? And they basically pick it apart. And sometimes it's constructive and it can be helpful, and you find that there are helpful things in it. But for the most part, going through it at the time is agonizing because you feel like your heart's being ripped open, And you're just like, oh, man, I put so much time, and you start to get offended maybe, and you just start to feel bad about yourself sometimes, and you leave there. I told Becky, sometimes I feel like changing my major every time after a critique, I was just like, I can't do this. And maybe you feel like that a little bit as we've been going through our series lately. We've been going through, we enter the ring actually this week for round 5 of what we're calling going 10 rounds in the fight of your life. And maybe you're feeling a little bit like this now, because what we're doing is we're looking at the 10 Commandments, but maybe in a different way, in getting to the heart of the 10 Commandments, or the core of the 10 Commandments, because at this core of the 10 Commandments, they reveal some of the greatest struggles of our heart that keep us from fully loving God. And because of that, when we look at these 10 Commandments, we look at some of these issues that we might have never thought of before, and all of a sudden it's ripping our heart open. We say, man, I see myself in that. Oh, I struggle with this, and oh, wow, I don't know what. So maybe you're feeling a little bit like this, but I want to encourage you this morning that we're getting there, and it's just like an art critique, it's always for our best. And God is working in us and through us as we work through this. And so far in this series, we've looked at the first 4 of the 10 Commandments, which are all about loving God and how we love God. And we looked at how these commandments have exposed, first of all, our struggle for control or for being our own God, our desire to settle for less than God in making idols or setting up other things besides God, our struggle to settle. Our struggle to manipulate life using our relationship with God, taking the Lord's name in vain. And the last week we looked at Sabbath keeping, right? Which exposes our struggle for success and being driven so much that we can't take our rest, our God-created rest that He's given us. And the purpose of this series, again, isn't just to make us feel bad or to expose, to just merely expose our heart struggles so that we feel guilty. Rather, the purpose of this series, hopefully, is as this gets exposed, then we find victory through these struggles as God reveals, restores, and renews our hearts as we trust in Him, right? Leading to a genuine, impactful lives that we live each and every day as we trust in Him. So it's about trusting Him to change us. Now, this week we pick up in Exodus chapter 20. So if you want to turn there, and we're in the 5th commandment. So we're almost halfway through our commandments, and we're in our 5th commandment. And this one's a fairly short one. It's in verse number 12. And it kind of marks a turning point in these 10 commandments. Here's what it says. Honor your father and your mother. that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And this command, you say, wow, this is a command just given for Israel because it's talking about the land God is giving you. But there's a bigger principle at play here. And what's interesting about this is this command is kind of a pivot in the Ten Commandments. Remember, we said the first 4 commands are all about loving God. And you remember when Jesus was talking to the religious leaders, and they said, what's the most important law we should keep? He says, most important law is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. The second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And in this is all the law, encapsulated all the law. And as we look at the Ten Commandments, the first 4 of the Ten Commandments are all about how we love God. They all address that. And then the last 6 of the Ten Commandments address how we're to love others. So this 5th commandment starts a shift from, all right, we've just learned how we're to love God. Now, what does this look like in our interpersonal relationships or our relationships with other people? And these loving relationships with others begin with how we respond to our primary God-given authority, our parents. So it's interesting, this command about honoring your parents. So let's take a closer look just to see what is being said here and what it kind of means, and then we'll talk about what it reveals in us. So it starts out, it says honor, right, is the first word we see here. And honor has kind of a twofold meaning. In one sense, honor means to submit or obey or place yourself under your father and your mother. And then the other part of honor is not just to submit, but submit in such a way that you esteem them. You lift them up. You place them higher than you. Okay? So it's this idea of submission and esteem, or respect is another word for this, honor. And it says, who are we to honor? Our father and mother. Notice it says both parents here. And this is interesting because sometimes we may say, well, I'll honor my dad because he's the strong one, but, and usually, one of your parents is usually your favorite that you feel like you connect the best with. So you're like, well, that's the one I'll honor, but I seem to butt heads with the other parent. And the reason why we do that is because when a couple marries, they usually marry their opposite. So it's the person that they're most attracted to. So that often is, then if your kid is like you, then they're going to probably connect better with your spouse because that's what drew you to your spouse, and vice versa. Okay? So that's kind of how that works a little bit. But this says both parents. And this is important for the Israelites as well, because in their way of thinking, you honored your father because that's where the line came through, that's where the blessing came through. So, but here God switches up and says, honor both your parents. Okay? And this command includes a promise, doesn't it? It says, so you're to honor your mother and your father. Why? So that your days may be long in the land the Father is giving you. Okay? So for Israelites here sitting at the base of Mount Sinai that are traveling, and God is leading them back to the promised land, it's in terms of his covenant promise with them, right? If you do this is part of God's covenant to bless you in the land he's giving you. As a matter of fact, if you do this, then you'll live long there in the land God is giving you. Things will go well, right? But this command reaches beyond. It's also for us, right? So it reaches beyond Israel, as it's mentioned also in the New Testament, this same command. The Apostle Paul talks about this command in the New Testament, but this time he's addressing Gentiles, so he's not addressing Jews. And here's what he says in Ephesians chapter 6. He says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. And then he says that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. So he kind of quotes it here, but yet, and Paul's kind of looking at this and giving a little more understanding to what it means to live long in the land I'm going to give you. For the Gentiles, he's saying, well, there's a quality of life issue here, right? So he adds the phrase, that it may go well with you. So here's what Paul's saying about this command, about the promise with this command, that when we honor or esteem or respect our parents, then it will go well with us. It's for our benefit. It's good for us, right? So how do we honor then our parents? as we look at this, as we look at this commandment, right? And whether our parents are biological or whether they're adopted, they're always going to be our parents. So how are we to be honored? In fact, this honoring our parents isn't just when we're a kid looking at our parents. It carries throughout our entire lives. We see Jesus modeled this kind of care for his parents or honoring his parents throughout his life. It says in the beginning of Luke that Jesus grew in esteem and grew well with, grew in stature before men. And that means that he was respectful and all of these things. And then we see when he's first starting his ministry and he's at a wedding with his mother, and his mother says, hey, there's a problem at the wedding. And Jesus is like, all right, I can, why are you telling me? All right, I'll help. And he kind of gets alongside his mom and helps. And then later on when he's on the cross and his mom is there, he makes sure that his mom is cared for. You see, this is what honor looks like through our lives. You see, as children, we honor our parents by willfully placing ourselves under their care, right? By listening to what they say, respecting them, and being under their care and their instruction and their guidance. So when they ask us to do something, we respect them. As we grow into adults, that honor grows then, because now we're almost peers with our parents in one sense, and we honor them by honestly seeking and appreciating their opinions and their advice and their experiences, and we kind of come alongside them. And then as our parents age, we honor our parents by making sure they're cared for. And oftentimes we help take care of them like they took care of us. In fact, this grew into one of the laws that the Israelites had and the Jewish people had, that when your parents got older, you were responsible under the law to make sure they were taken care of. So to kind of understand what that's about. So here's the commandment then in a nutshell, just so we kind of understand it. Here it is. We're to esteem and respect our parents so that we can experience God's blessing in life. And this is huge for us to grasp. And it's kind of simple to grasp, right? All right, I honor my parents. I listen to them and I do all these things. But yet it's not as easy to live out, is it? In fact, honoring our parents and honoring any authority in our life, it seems to be more the exception than the rule in our society today, isn't it? And I don't know if you ever struggle with this. You see, this commandment isn't just for kids. And maybe you're sitting here and going, well, I'm not a kid. Why do I need to listen to this commandment? Because it's about more than just honoring just our parents. It's about honoring an authority that God places in our life. But it's becoming rare to see this. And we see it in the home, and we see it in this context with honoring our mothers and fathers. In fact, here's how it kind of plays out. And let me see if this kind of rings true for you. Here's what happens today, right? Kids at some point are just kind of waiting, and in their house, then they seek this point where they just want to rebel. They want to get out, right? And so they just, maybe they don't rebel, but they just endure their parents until the time where they can break free from them the first chance they get. And then the older kids get, the older we get, we then want to prove to our parents that they didn't know how to do it right, but we know how to do it right, right? When you first have kids, you do that. I'm going to do things different. My parents, they didn't know how to, so I'm going to do it right. And then we tell our parents how to do it right. We were talking in the office about, we have a couple of the newborns, and it's funny how sometimes first-time parents are like, oh, no, this is how you hold them. And they're telling their parents how to hold a baby and how to take care. It's like, we've been here before. We know how to do this. But sometimes we don't respect that, and we don't do that. And then later in life, oftentimes, parents get forgotten, don't they? In the busyness of life, and we just put them in a home somewhere and we forget about them. And we're like, oh. And we see this happening in our society. And we also see this honor for authority just kind of wasting away, where people are like, you can't tell me what to do. And but here's an important part of this command, though, when we think about reclaiming this or capturing back this, honoring not only our parents, but honoring authority that God places in us. And here's a truth. The way we honor our parents affects the way our children will honor us, and it will affect generations to follow. And that's why it's so important, that we know how to respect and honor society, authority in our society. And when that starts to break down, it doesn't break down right away, but over generations, all of a sudden it's gone, and we say, how did it get here? And sometimes we like to shake our head and say, kids today. Well, you know why kids today are like they are today? Because we also were having trouble with that, so that's what we modeled for them. And they just took it to the next level, and it goes down. So the way we honor our parents affects the way our children. The way we honor authority affects the way those who follow us will honor authority. So when we think about that, so why is it such a rare thing then to honor authority? Do you agree it's kind of rare that authority is honored in our world today? Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay. You know, why is it so difficult to honor our parents? Or why is it so difficult sometimes even for us to honor our God-given authority in our own life? Well, if we have trouble depending on God, we'll have trouble with this. And in this way, this fifth commandment, it kind of mirrors the first commandment. Remember the first commandment? You will have no other gods before me. It's about being in control. You know, I want control of my life. Do you see how honoring our parent kind of reflects that? That's on a vertical level with us and God. Now this is a horizontal level. How do I honor those around me that are placed in authority? Well, it's that same kind of struggle to be in control, right? And it's difficult. And the answer to solving this or bringing honor back for parents, it's not in those in authority to say, we just need to tighten the screws. We need more discipline. We need to just tighten it down and say, you need to do this. This is why. It's not about outward stimulus to make us honor authority. You see, the struggle isn't in our actions, it's in our heart. So there's a heart struggle going on. And herein lies our opponent for round 5 of this fight of our lives. And here it is behind honoring this command to honor our father and mother, or honor our God-given authority in our life, that our days may go, that it may go well with us. And here's the struggle. It's our struggle for independence. You see, behind this commandment is about being independent. Just like the vertical is about being independent from God. I want to be my own God. This one is about, I want to be in charge. And there's this heart issue of this, right? And so when we have trouble depending on God, we have trouble then depending on our God-given authority that he places over us, wanting independence in our own life so we're in charge. And it's interesting, as we look at the way we live our lives, we see this result of sin, this result of this heart struggle, because really, when we look at independence, we say, no, independence is something we should strive for. You know, we watch Braveheart and we hear, William Wallace, freedom, and we're like, yeah, that's what we need, freedom. We need to be independent. And we start to equate independence with maturity, with success, with this is what we should be striving for, independence. And it's a sign of growing up, so we crave it, right? And we fight against anything that we feel that is holding us back from us being in charge, or us feeling like we can have our own way and do things our own way. Unfortunately, this is a pseudo self-sufficiency because it makes it impossible. And when we start to feel this, and we start to feel, no, it's all about me being in control, it's all about me being free to do what I want and say what I want and have everything the way I want things. See, that's a trap. And what it does is it keeps us from truly loving God, and it keeps us from truly loving others if we don't know how to honor authority and God-given authority in our lives. In fact, Jesus tells a parable about this. You know, Jesus used to tell a lot of stories, and he tells a great parable about this in Luke chapter 15. In fact, it was our scripture reading this morning. It's about a father and a son, and it paints this beautiful picture of God's love for us. But you know what else it does? It helps us to understand this struggle, because we see this struggle in this parable, this heart struggle, and we see how it kind of plays out. And so as we look again at this story, I want you to see if you see yourself in this, or see some of your own struggle in this, as we look at some of this struggle for independence and say, man, maybe I do have this a little bit in me. So here's what it says in Luke chapter 15. Let me read it again. Jesus said to them, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me a share of the property that is coming to me. He divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. There he squandered his property in reckless living, and when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. And he was longing to be fed the pods that the pigs ate, because nobody gave him anything. So here's what we have in this story. And I don't know about you, and you're sitting there going, man, how could this kid's a real punk, isn't he? I mean, how could he be like that? What a troublemaking kid. Because here's what's happening in that. Back in the society that day, you got your inheritance when your parent passed. Okay? So you're waiting, and then when that happens, you get the inheritance, and it's divided. Well, here the son says, no, I want it before you're dead, Dad, because I want to be young enough to enjoy it. And the father gives it to him, right? And then he goes and he blows it all, right? And I look at that and I say, I don't want to be lumped into how this kid is. But as we start to look at some of what's behind some of the thought processes, I don't know about you, but I start to see some of myself. And I'm like, I don't necessarily like it. But I see that, man, these struggles aren't that different than the struggle he had in honoring his father and this struggle for independence. So as we kind of look closer at this, the first thing I want you to see how this struggle plays out, and we see it through this son, is we tend to struggle to honor our God-given authority in our life and struggle for independence because, first of all, we feel entitled. Have you ever felt entitled? You know, we see this in this parable, right? The son, he's faithful by all accounts. He's faithful to his dad. He's a good son. He hasn't been thrown out of the house or anything like that. So he's a good son of this guy, right? And the father has no reason to think he's not a good son. Yet, that is until he gets his inheritance. Once he gets his inheritance, he's like, see ya, I'm out of here. I got no time for you. I got what I want. You see, that's where his heart is kind of revealed. And instead of cherishing his father, he feels, well, I've put in my time, and I've got what I'm entitled to, so now I can go. You ever been there? You know, have you ever respected your parents for what you could get from them? I'm going to behave just so they can, so when we go on vacation, I can get what I want. Or when we were real young, we used to do this leading up to Christmas, right? I better be real good so I can get what I asked for Christmas. And we start to say that, and if we don't get it, then we get angry, don't we? And we don't get what we think we're owed. And we can do this with other authorities in our lives, and we want to obey the rules because we'll get rewarded. And things are going to go right for us. And so we respect that authority just so we get what's coming to us, just so we can benefit. The problem is this kind of respect, it hinges on what it gets back in return. Have you ever said to somebody, I'll respect you if you respect me? You see, that's what's behind this. I'll give you respect if you give me something to respect you for. You ever say that to your parents? Kids ever said that to you? And you're like, how could you possibly say that? When I was a police chaplain, that used to be always with the police. The police, why should I listen to you? Well, because I'm your authority. But no, you have to show me that you can give me something, that I have a benefit. Why? Because I'm entitled to this. And so behind this is this faulty notion that, I'm entitled to something, and if you don't give me what I feel like I should have, then all bets are off in the way I treat you. That's not coming under authority. That's raising ourselves to that authority. You see how that kind of springs from the first round of raising ourselves to want to be God ourselves? So we kind of have this, and it kind of springs from that, and it goes into our relationships with others. It says, I'm entitled to something from my parents, and it could be money, it could be happiness, it could be, stuff, gifts, things like that. It could be respect, it could be equality. And if we don't feel like we're getting it, then we're in the right to rebel and to not listen. Have you ever gone through that thought process? Well, they're not holding up their end of the bargain, so why should I? That's not what this command is about. This command says you do it. It doesn't say honor your father and mother if they're honorable. It doesn't say honor authority if they give you good reason to. It just says do this. This is the commandment. Why is that? Why is that so hard? Well, because oftentimes we can feel entitled. And we sit there and say, well, what about me? Why should I do that? And it comes down to that we don't trust. We don't trust that God knows what's best. And that's the truth. God places our parents in our lives, He places us in the family we're in, with the parents we're in, and He does it for a reason. And God's plans are always perfect, right? Psalm 18 says, the ways of the Lord are perfect. So He knows what He's doing. The reason we're to respect our parents or respect authority is out of respect for God. Even if our parents give us no reason to respect or honor them, we honor them because we honor God. And we're saying, God, I may not be able to see it right now, but I trust you. So then I will give you the honor that's due their position. In fact, that's what Paul says in Colossians. He says, children, obey your parents in everything. Why? Because it pleases the Lord. It pleases the Lord. It's an act of worship. So honoring human authority, it's a reflection of our love and our trust in God. God has a plan, even if we don't see it, in placing that authority over us. Maybe it's safety. Maybe it's for our provision. Maybe it's for our development that we don't see yet. But God has a plan for placing us there. And that's why He says, I want you to honor it. Just trust me. And yet our heart says, no, I need to be in control, even of my earthly relationships. So I want to be independent. Now, in addition to feeling entitled, maybe you say, well, I don't have that problem. Congratulations. I look at that and I'm like, oh. Anyway, in addition to feeling entitled, though, we also discover through this little parable, that in the struggle for independence, we often think we know better. And this is another reason why we have trouble honoring authority in our lives or honoring our parents, is because, well, I know better. What do they know? And we see this with the son, right? That's why he takes an inheritance and he bolts. You see, if he really honored his father, he would take the inheritance and say, all right, Dad, how do I invest this? How do I make this work? Dad, what should I do with this? Or stayed close by, for guidance in that. Instead, he says, now I have it. Now I'll show you how I should have been living from the first place. And he takes it, and he goes, and he lives like he wants, right? And basically in that, he's telling his father, you know what? No, I know better what was right for me. And now that I finally have the money to do it, I'm going to show you what was better for me. And how I need to live and how I need to be happy. Have you ever been there? That you just say, well, I'm not going to honor you because I know what I need. I know what's better. How do you know what I need? Maybe we don't take off, but instead, we discredit authority over us, or we shut it out, and we say, I don't need to listen to you. You can tell me all you want, but I'm not going to do it. And we kind of have that idea. Parents just don't know. They don't know what we're going through today. Remember saying that to your parents? You don't know what the world's like today. In the immortal words of the Fresh Prince, parents, they just don't understand. Right? And we kind of have that idea, and we say, so you don't know what we're going, so you can't possibly be able to speak anything into my life that's going to be any kind of wisdom, because I know better, because I'm living this, right? And maybe in that we reject them because they do something that we didn't want to hear. We don't understand why they would tell us to do something. We say, you just don't know, so I'm just going to shut you out. And sometimes we do that with authority in our lives, and we think we kind of know what's going on. And what's amazing with that is we don't need to be taught this struggle. This lies in our heart from the day we're born. Do you know that? We don't need, and at a certain age it comes out, At a certain age, our IQ magically soars past our parents' IQ. And suddenly, they don't know what they're doing or what they're talking about, and we do. And it kind of seems to correspond with times when we, maybe as children or young adults, we begin to gain knowledge and we begin to gain experience in life, and we start to feel more grown up, and all of a sudden, our knowledge just increases overnight. We wake up one morning and we know everything. And this newfound knowledge then hits our struggle for independence, and it inflates us, right? To think that we know better than anybody else, especially our authority. I remember the first time, my first semester of college, I went away to college, and I was first time on my own. And that was an amazing semester of college because I learned so much that when I got back, I didn't need to hear from anybody. Nobody had anything else to teach me because I knew it all. So when my dad talked to me about my finances, I said, I know how to balance my checkbook. You don't need to tell me about this. I know what I'm doing. My mom asked me about relationships. I said, I have a girlfriend. You don't need to tell me anything. I got this covered. And all these other issues we kind of had. Don't question me about these things, and so on. And all of a sudden, we start to feel like, no, I've got this. And I know what I'm talking about. And I know but you know what? Soon this lofty view of intelligence fades when we start to kind of go in our newfound knowledge and we realize maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be. And sometimes it's with other authorities. We ignore that authority of that road sign that said caution curve. And soon we come to the reality as we're sitting in the woods with a crumpled car that, maybe that sign was right. But it comes a point where we realize maybe our parents, maybe our authorities really do know something. And there comes a point in our life where we start to think, wow, they knew a lot more than I thought they ever knew. In fact, they know a lot about a lot of things. And all of a sudden we come to that point and we say, wow, most of all, maybe God knows what he's doing when he places that authority over us. And we come to that point oftentimes, though, when we find ourselves in trouble because we acted on our struggle for independence and we did what we wanted and we rejected that authority. And then we come back and we come to our senses and we're like, maybe I don't know everything. And I think of this prodigal son as he's in the mud here with the pigs with nothing to eat, watching what they're eating, saying, man, that looks good. Maybe my dad was onto something. Maybe I should have listened to him a little bit better. So we start to struggle, and we struggle with this independence, not only for feeling entitled, but that we know better. And we think we can know better. And then as we look at that as this kid, young adult, sits in the mud with the pigs, right? We find one more way that this struggle for independence kind of works its way out, right? And in rejecting authority, we can also end up living recklessly. And this is kind of the result of that mindset, right? And that struggle is then we start to live recklessly. And we see this with the son, right? He strikes off on his own, and what does he do? It says he lives recklessly, right? He squanders all of his money. All of the fortune that his dad spent a lifetime to accrue, he goes through. Living the way he wanted to live, right? And now he's eating with pigs. None of us has ever done that, have you? Have you ever lived recklessly? Have you ever kind of just thrown stuff away? Do you ever run up a credit card bill, because you didn't realize that a bill actually comes in the mail for that? And you kind of, I'm like, oh, wow, I can do this. Unfortunately, our insatiable desire for independence, it leads us to have a skewed view of authority, and therefore we say, well, authority is kind of oppressive and it's holding me back. So once I break free from that, I just want to do it all. I'm just free and I can do whatever I want. It's like that first time your parents go away out of town and you're just like, I can do anything I want, And, you eat pizza every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for a week, and you do all this stuff and then you realize, I don't feel too good. Right? And you start to say, maybe just doing everything I wanted to do isn't the way to do it. But we see it as oppressive and holding us back. So we let loose, but what we find is that maybe we're not prepared to deal with this freedom. And because of that, we act foolishly or recklessly, and we don't understand the consequences of our actions. And that's what often happens when we kind of lose this struggle and we go away from it. There used to be a show on TV several years ago. It was called Lottery Changed My Life. Did you ever watch that? It's all these people that bought lottery tickets, and all of a sudden they win millions, right? And an ongoing theme with that show is most people that win the large sums of money in the lottery go through that money, and it's all gone. They have nothing left. If they didn't have it before, they get it, and then they just go through it. Why? Because they didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to deal with that freedom. or how to go through that, you know? And maybe for us then it's not money, but it's just we go out prematurely with our independence and we don't know how to live with that freedom or how to live in a responsible way. So we do whatever feels right or seems fun despite the consequences. And oftentimes we hit a wall. Here's something important. It's important truth. You know, God gives us our parents and God gives us other authority to help prepare us for freedom. Do you know that? Not take it away. You see, that's the parent's job, is we're preparing our kids to live responsibly when they're on their own. Amazing thing, the last time we went down to North Carolina, gas prices were so high, so I drove real slow. I drove the speed limit the whole way home. I mean, not 1 mile an hour over the speed limit. And I'll tell you what, there was such freedom going up through Delaware through all the speed traps. And I'm watching people go zooming by me, and I'm watching all the cops stop people for speeding. And there was such freedom and relaxation being able to drive knowing I'm not speeding. And I had freedom just to drive because, why? Because I came under authority instead of always pushing it. And you're saying, wow, that helped prepare me for that. And now I can live responsibly, and now I get to experience what freedom really feels like. It's coming under proper authority and trusting that God knows what he's doing. God doesn't place parents and other authorities over us to squash us or to keep us captive. He places them there to prepare for us to live well and responsibly. And when we realize that, then we start to see authority not as something against us, but we start to see authority and we start to see our parents as a gift God gives us. You see, and that's the key to honoring our parents. We're not struggling for independence. Rather, we're struggling to trust that God knows what he's doing in giving us others. And trust that God places them in our lives for that reason. So, how do we win this battle? How do we win this battle for the fight of our lives? Well, we've talked about this kind of framework, right? For how do we win all these heart battles. And it begins by reflecting, right? We take our time. The prodigal son started reflecting when he's there with the pigs, and he's in the slop with the pigs, and he's at his lowest eating with the pigs. Verse 17 says this, and he came to himself. Do you know what that is? He took some time to reflect, sitting there in the mud with pigs snorting all about him, and he says, let me take stock of my life. Let me reflect on what life is about. He had an aha moment. And as he started to reflect, he says, you know what? I would have been better off as one of my dad's servants than I am here. Maybe I can go back and just ask my dad to hire me. And at least I'll have it better than I would be here. And he starts to reflect and he says, maybe I messed up, basically. And this is where it starts for us. We start to reflect and we say, all right, does this apply to me? Do I struggle for independence sometimes? Do I take that and want to buck authority and go against this? God, how does this work out in my life? And if we find ourselves struggling to honor our parents or other authority, we need to reflect. And we said, God, reveal this struggle. Reveal the giants, what they look like. God, is it me feeling entitled? Is that why I struggle with this? Is it me feeling I know better? Maybe that's it. Or is it me feeling, I just want to live the way I want, so I'm kind of selfish? What is it, God? And this is where we kind of take that critique from God, and he opens up our hearts. And again, it's hard sometimes to reflect and to be honest and say, God, show me where it is. But once God shows us where it is and we reflect, then we get to repent. And again, repentance isn't trying then to change it and say, all right, now I know what I have to do. You know what we have to do? We have to give up. We have to say, God, help me change. I don't have the power to change this because it's in me, this heart. You need to change my heart. And so for the prodigal, he went and he threw himself on his father's mercy. This is what happened. He goes home and he says, Dad, I'm sorry. I blew it. I'll be your servant. And he found his father was more gracious than he could have ever thought. And that's what we find when we come to God and we say, God, I struggle with this. I can't do this. And you know what God says? Finally, all right, now I can start working with you. And so as God reveals and uncovers these things, we ask him for forgiveness and to change us, to change our mindsets, to strengthen our discipline, to restore a proper perspective in all these things. Again, it's not about changing behaviors, it's about changing our hearts. And we need to ask God to do it. But repentance also in this regard, since it's person to person, also means that we ask the person that we've been having trouble submitting to or honoring, we ask them for forgiveness. So we go to that person and we say, you know what, I'm sorry. I've been so difficult. Please forgive me. I'm really asking God to help teach me what it means to honor you better. And we take that and we seek it with others because, again, these commandments are about our relationship not only with God but with others. And then we respond. We walk from that. We walk forward, right, in forgiveness and God-given strength. And we begin to honor that authority that's placed in our life. We begin to explore what that means and be gracious with authority over us. When they do something and we don't understand and we say, no, that's obviously wrong. We can be gracious and we say, all right, I'll trust it. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt because God knows what he's doing. And we can be more gracious in our relationships with others, and realize people aren't perfect. They're going to mess up themselves. So we can kind of work through this, but God still has his purposes in place. So when we see these struggles to honor authority and this struggle for independence in our life, we need to nip it in the bud. We need to reflect on it. Say, God, what is causing this? And then God change it. And then we walk in his strength. And when we do this, you know what happens? Over time, we start to see victory in it. We start to see that heart struggle for independence is eventually God transforms that to a passion for freedom marked by trust in God. You see how that's different? The struggle for independence says this is all about me. Rather, it gets changed for a passion for freedom. God, I want to live out what you have for me as I trust you. That's freedom. That's freedom. And it's marked by our trust in God and his care for us. Again, this kind of freedom, it doesn't flee from authority. It embraces God-given authority. And it says, all right, God, this is for your best, and it's going to be for my best, that it may go well with us. So this is God's fifth commandment. And it's the first, again, that deals with interpersonal relationships, and it deals with kind of one of those tough ones in our home or with authority. But it's that commandment, honor your father and mother. Honor our God-given authority. And take on that heart struggle for independence and allow God to transform it. Let's pray.